Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the storm the Capitol kind. So if you are curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter, and I am your host. I am also the lead pastor of the Loft Faith community in Westwood, California. This podcast is a weekly podcast that will most of the time features myself and my friends and fellow staff members at the Loft, Julia Black, who is our director of music, and Wesley Garcia, who is the director of Loft Connections. In today's episode, we will be discussing the Democratic National Convention and really just the obvious influence of the Black church, and particularly Black preaching in the speeches that have been going on the last few days. And then we're going to end by discussing just the party that was the DNC roll call and kind of how we experienced that. So, Julia, Wesley, how are y'all doing?
Hey, I'm all right.
Everyone.
A little under the weather. Forgive my congested sound because I'm congested. So that's what happens.
Yeah, it's that time of year. School's
It
back.
is. The germs are flying.
They're just
The germs are
passing
flying.
from kid to kid and counting everyone else as they go along their lives. Yeah.
The germs are flying. Wesley, how was your trip?
Oh, it was so good. Just being in the desert with friends, always a good time. I think there's something to be said about taking some time away from like the city and being just surrounded by quiet and like the last couple of days the moon has been huge and very bright, but it was never so bright as when the only light in the desert is the moon. Like you really see it. So it was a great time.
I know the last time I was out, like really in the woods, it was Gabby's birthday last year, and we're up in Ojai, again in a rural place. We rented this place. There wasn't a lot of housing there, and we saw a shooting star. And just like, again, remembering how bright the stars are when there isn't like the light pollution of the city. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. So that's a great point.
Totally.
So we have been, experienced a few nights of almost, I was going to say, the Democratic National Convention kind of feels like a party.
Absolutely.
It is definitely
joy.
popping. Yeah. Hope. I mean, that's one thing I keep talking about. Like, you know, there's a sense of hope, joy, optimism. It's been different than it obviously would have been had Joe Biden stayed on the ticket. So it's definitely been a shift. It's been a positive shift. But for the sake of our podcast, one of the things that, Julia, you pointed out as we were doing the production meetings and thinking about what we're going to be talking about the next few weeks, kind of just the obvious influence of the like Black church, Black religion, and Black preaching in the speeches.
It's only Wednesday. So we've only seen Monday and Tuesday so far because we're recording this on Wednesday morning. We have a Black candidate.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And we are sure she's Black. We do know this.
We are sure. We are sure, especially after the last two nights of speeches. It's not lost on me how diverse the party is, especially, I mean, listen, I'm not going to lie. I did not watch 1 second of the RNC, but I'm assuming, I feel like they drug out Ben Carson at some point.
I don't know if Ben Carson was there. I know.
I have no idea.
What's that guy from South Carolina? Tim Scott was there.
Yeah, him. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they, dribbled out a few of the worst that we have. But the DNC is so diverse, and not just with ethnicity. I mean, it's just like it is economically diverse. It's diverse. There are so many women. There's one on the ticket.
I mean, religiously diverse,
Yes.
I think, is another really important point that was pretty obvious, actually, but the number of Jewish speakers that were actually speaking. So, it was, and even to an extent, one might say you could extend that diversity to political diversity because, there was the Republican mayor from Mesa, Arizona.
Oh,
who
yeah,
spoke. Yeah, I mean, there have been a few. I know the former press secretary for Donald Trump who resigned on January 6th after everything.
Right.
Like, she spoke. With respect to diversity, the unifying theme may just be this notion of moving forward and the danger of going backwards, right? That I think everybody, regardless of your race or religion or even political orientation, should be able to see. But Julia, I specifically want to ask, I guess both of you. So that would have been Tuesday or Monday night. I know you were both impressed by Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock's speech.
Yeah, that was my favorite
Absolutely.
speech of the night. Yeah. I want to talk about it. I do also want to mention the 3 women that night. Well, Josh and Amanda Zarowski from Texas. She was the lead plaintiff on the case that sued the state of Texas because she had a miscarriage. The week after Roe was overturned, could not receive an abortion, went fully into sepsis, and lost her ability to forever carry a child due solely to the actions of her state. So she and her husband spoke out about how it's not just a woman's issue. And then another woman who suffered in a different state, and then a young girl who talked about she was raped by her stepfather, took her first pregnancy test at the age of 12, and it was possible. She at the time was able to get an abortion, but today she would not be able to in her state.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I want to say in response to that is what frustrates me, what angers me from a theological standpoint is the faulty reasoning, right, that conservatives use with respect to arguing for what they call a pro-life stance by saying that, like, this, if this potential pregnancy, you know, the unborn life didn't do anything wrong, and so why do they have to suffer and die as a consequence because of the actions of, for instance, this young girl's father? And I think it belies and more belittles the life of the person, the woman, woman who's carrying, like, her life doesn't matter. And it's a false narrative with respect to this idea that, again, life begins at conception, right? This idea that this is historically Christian, which is just fundamentally not true. Right. Like it's not within the history of Christianity, like within Roman Catholic tradition, which is the only tradition that had an issue with abortion up until the 1970s.
Right.
They argued until you could actually feel movement. That was when ensoulment took place, which was usually around like 16 to 20 weeks. And that was the tradition forever. Literally, like, you know, and so they're not drawing on tradition. They're not drawing on good science. Right? Because they talk about, oh, the baby heart beats at this. Like, that's not, the baby actually doesn't have a heart, you know, or the embryo doesn't have a heart, right? Like, so it's the lies and the manipulation that I think is angering, because if you genuinely care about people, if you genuinely love people, and there is a way to make sure and prevent these incidents from happening, right? To make sure that you know, children are less likely to be assaulted, that people are less likely to get pregnant unwanted, and there's all these other preventative measures one can take, and you deny people the opportunity to do that, then it is not about your religion. It is about control. And I think I keep coming back to, like, using how people can continue to use the Bible and use Christianity as a tool of control, like they use for women's bodies, like they use for slavery, like they use for indigenous genocide. And people continue to fall for the okie doke. Yeah. You know, I'm like, this ain't nothing new. This is the same. Like, you know, this is nothing new. And so I get frustrated. That's all. Like, when I'm like, how are people still thinking that theologically you can make this argument when it's so fundamentally flawed?
But the point is that it is disingenuous and it is completely dishonest, and they are fully aware of that. That's the point. Like, that's why for me it's so infuriating. They know, like, to me, I hate the idea, this like pretense that life is precious. That's like one of this is a precious life, when, like, whether life should or shouldn't be considered precious, we can debate, I guess, but the reality of the world is that it is not. Like, there's nothing in our lived reality that implies that any of our societies think that any life is precious inherently. We do not treat life as precious in our society. We don't.
Well, I mean, you know, classic. I know you like to. I want to rein it in and say, like, in American culture, you know, because there are other cultures who actually do treat life in a way that. Well, I would say indigenous communities, especially historically.
Yeah, of course, but that's not those aren't the societies and governments that we live in.
I know. I'm just trying to make sure I have some clarity. I'm just trying to make sure I add some
In the
clarity
modern world,
in a Western capitalist society.
correct. Life
Yeah.
is not precious. It's not. It's
Yeah,
not.
and I think so. In this sense, you're pointing out just the theological inconsistency, where if they want to argue life is precious, then the logical follow up would be, you have,
Pick
extended,
one thing.
yeah,
Just anything. Maybe
healthcare,
kids not dying from being shot at school, like war, like starvation,
healthcare.
anything.
I mean,
Like,
you can say just healthcare, literally just healthcare. That's just like a super basic thing, just healthcare. And this is like, nah, we're good. You don't need to. Once you had that baby, you need to get back to work.
Absolutely.
Like you need to get no time off. And so yeah, no, it's the disingenuine nature of the argument that is infuriating.
I guess for me, like when I think about specifically this topic, there's like a fundamentalism to their theology, sort of like a rigidity that just extends into how they see other aspects of life. So for them, life begins at conception. It doesn't matter what evidence, what information is presented. Even if you could present them that their idea of life at conception is having incredibly negative effects downstream, it wouldn't matter. The fundamentalism is there. This is the thought. This is the idea, and nothing can sway them from it. So, like, as much as I want to, I don't know, I want to give them credit for being disingenuous, but I just think that the very narrow worldview is transported over into how they see life, and so. I guess I'm saying I think they're being wholly themselves when they're saying that life begins at conception. It's just they see it the same way as they see their religious fundamentalism. They see this sort of life perspective being what it is, and not wanting to move from it. So I guess the fundamentalists that I've met in my life, it doesn't seem like they can acknowledge or would acknowledge that what they believe is disingenuous or not really. It's just that is the belief, and they're not going to move from it.
but how is that faith?
I think it's intellectual immaturity. I mean, it's not faith that is rooted in the spirit as much as it is rooted in selfishness, right? Really, it's, as the old folk used to say, it's rooted in flesh.
That word.
It's rooted in flesh.
No.
It's rooted in selfishness, and I think you can easily turn the self into an idol, as we are looking at. Many people do that right now. So I think that's a big part of it. And Julia, thank you for bringing this up, because I didn't actually catch this part of the DNC. So I'm glad we're starting with this, because I think it's helpful to then look at Senator Warnock or Reverend Dr. Warnock and see how you have someone who is like, I was genuinely surprised at how much he quoted and referenced scripture in his talk. I was like, Arab, obviously this, he's a pastor at Martin Luther King's old church, so it's not like it's a surprise, but like, I was like, wow, this dude is really digging deep in.
He was preaching.
Yeah, he was in the Bible, man. I was like, okay. So yeah, so just, what's for you stood out in his speech, or anything that some of your takeaways?
I don't have the quote in front of me, but first of all, it is not lost on me. We have a Black candidate. The Blackness in this convention is strong. And I'm here for it. I love it. I hope it's reading well to the rest of the country. I'm at my house having a good time. I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but I feel seen. I feel like one of the things that's happening is this activation. Like when Joe endorsed Kamala and everybody jumped behind her, there's like been this activation of like the ancestral lines of civil action in our nation, right? Like it was like in the same way that they were activated for Obama, the NAACP, she's still strong, like the Divine Nine, ready to go. Like everyone is like lined up and knows what to do. And it feels almost instinctual in a way of like, we've done this before. Like we didn't do it, but we know how to do this. And I think his speech reminded me of like where we sit in the legacy of it, like what he represents, who he is, the church that he is the leader of, and the way that he speaks and the way that he is embracing this moment was a reminder to me of the history that we're making, and that like where we are standing and like who is representing what now in this moment. And like the ability to like see the progress, right? Like he is, I mean, I can't say he's the heir, but like he is the recipient of King's legacy, and he's very different than him, but he is today's version of that in a way. Does that make sense?
No, I think it totally makes sense. And I mean, having visited Ebenezer this summer, you see that and I think this is pretty typical. I mean, it was definitely common in the church I grew up in, a Black Methodist church, where there is this clear intergenerational, multi-generational connection where wisdom and knowledge is theoretically being passed down, right? There is this cultivation of call, if you will, within that community. And so one of the best examples, so I was there for graduation Sunday. So they had all the people who were graduating from college or graduating from high school, going to college, or graduating from college or graduate school come up front and wear their, the stoles or whatever that you get. And what was so fascinating to me was not just the number of kids and their rounds of applause, but how they were the support that this church had given them and the people who had been graduates before and how they had come back, right? But there's this investment they make in their youth with the expectation that people are going to come back and contribute. There's the young pastor they had just hired, grew up in the church and left to go to school, but then came back and go to grad school at Candler and now is a pastor at this church, right? There's this way in which, as you said, Julia, like this ancestral legacy they're tapping into, like this has been, we are, to an extent, different cultures, particularly marginalized, oppressed cultures, Black culture has been built for this because it's the only way we've been able to survive is through solidarity. And I think this is where you see, especially Black church, Black theology present in the DNC right now, in the solidarity, in the ways in which you're seeing like, hey, we know what to do. Like you said,
Right.
we know what to do because this is the only way, this tradition that speaks against oppression, marginalization, the frailties of a kind of white supremacist Christianity. It's the only way it survived, and so I think that's an excellent point to bring up the way in which the ancestral legacy gets passed down and has continued to be passed down from slave religion to today.
Well, and so many people have left the Black church for so many reasons, but it's still in a way because for a long time the government was trash and did not offer anything to Black people. And the Black church was the center of the community, right? And so even though people have left the Black church, the tradition is strong. And I see that in this election. And I see it in like Justin Pearson and Justin Jones from Tennessee, right? So like you see Reverend Warnock, and then you see the Justins from Tennessee, and you see that it's still here.
I mean, it's so cultural that it'd be hard. I mean, if you are Black and grew up in a moderately Black community, you have Black church experience. Like you just can't escape from it. But also, Wesley, I'm curious, what was your take on Warnock's speech?
Yeah, I mean, many of the speeches have been very inspirational, and I don't know if it's because Warnock, is coming from a Black church experience and is preaching while he's giving his message or doing his speech, but he had me on the verge of tears. Like I think there's something inspirational and sort of hopeful about the community ethic that he centers. I remember re-listening to his speech, and the amount of times he says together just like really sort of brings home the point, like we do this with each other. We do this as a community. We aren't alone in this. And I mean, one of the things that he said is that I have a personal stake in the health of my neighbor. It's like a real sort of centering of like, there is no individual sort of like making all this happen. We do this as a community. We are responsible for one another. And then, at the end of that speech, he goes on this like little sort of like, I don't know if there's a specific word for it in preaching, but like this whole line where he's really riling up the crowd. And it starts with like, I need my neighbor's kid to be okay so that my children will be okay. Like it's this like restatement of we do this together. And I think that sort of like always fills me with hope because it centers the reality that community is so important. Having people around you to support you and then being there for other people is such a central aspect to being human. And he just brings it to the forefront. So I loved his speech.
Yeah, it was amazing, I think, in how much he was able to say in such a short amount of time too, because he only spoke like 12 minutes, and he was able to really get a lot in there. I
That's
think
my
for
favorite
me,
speech of the night.
for me, what stood out was, like I said, how much he used scripture. And so, because he was comparing and contrasting Donald Trump endorsing a Bible and saying, like, why do you even need to endorse a Bible? Because, there's a Trump Bible that has the Constitution and Declaration of Independence in it and all this other stuff.
So
which
ridiculous.
which is strange in of itself, because stuff that's just so disconnected from what Jesus is disconnected from it's disconnected from tradition. That's all. It's like
two
it's
things
so
that have nothing to do with each other.
Empire and what Jesus was talking about.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, this makes no sense. But he talks about, he quotes Micah, and he talks about do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. He talks about the greatest commandment, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then he goes to Matthew 25, like literally, like, whatever you do to the least of these is what you do to me. And like and this is what I love about what he said and the way he's using Christianity and talking about the kind of Christianity that's representative of much of what we believe, is that there is this impetus within this tradition that we follow that is about justice, right? That's not about like dehumanization, that it's so obviously about justice. And I think, Julia, to your point about why some people, Black people, have left the church or left the Black church, even though statistically, well, it's fewer, more Black people go to church than any other group in America, and now it's moving up with Latinos. But so even though people have left, it's still way more than
than what others.
Wesley. I just called Wesley, like, my people. Like it's a race between who's the most churchy between our people and your people. But like, there's this reality, right, where if we get back to that aspect of the gospel and that aspect of what the church historically has been within the community, I think that's what reignites people. And it's what we see, right? I mean, honestly, what's happening in that space at the DNC is a little churchy. Right. Like it's got a little bit. It's a party. It's got a little bit of church. And if you've been to a good Black church worship service, if you happen to come to the Loft when we have our gospel concert, it's gonna feel a little bit like a party. It's gonna feel a little bit like church, and that's my friends. That's called good church. That's a good church experience.
True.
Julia, is there anything else that stood out to you about Reverend Warnock's speech before we move on and talk about Michelle's?
I don't think so. I think no, not that you haven't said. It's the call to scripture for me.
Yeah.
It's the reminder. It's the juxtaposition of like, what. It's so easy to go on the interweb and see all the white male preachers saying these crazy, crazy things about what the women should do and the gays, the queer, like whatever. Like it is, and it's so difficult for me to see my faith in that. It just is so antithetical to what I believe. And so that last bit that he had about the children of the world, like that to me, I don't understand how that could be controversial. I would love any conservative Christian to explain to me how that, and not just any conservative, anyone who comes for me when I say that I'm religious, and like that to me is what my faith represents. When I'm a Christian, that I'm that kind of Christian, right? You say we're not the Storm the Capitol kind. No, we're the Raphael Warnock kind. And I would love if anybody can't understand why or what, like, come talk to Dr. Carter, not me. Email him. He's
my
the
job.
Professional, right?
That's what I get paid to do.
So I challenge you to email him.
Hey, I've had my fair share of theological debates, coming from working at a conservative Catholic school, and I'm pretty good, so I feel pretty confident. So I'm not too stressed about anybody emailing me or
if you email me, I might cuss you out. So
yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Let's not. So I would recommend not emailing Julia. I recommend not doing that. I want to spend a few minutes also talking about, mostly Michelle's speech. If there's anything you want to say about Barack's speech, that's fine. But I mean, and it's fun. And I say that in all seriousness because I finished this and I was like, man, they should have let her go last.
He said it.
I know. He did get up. He said, actually, I got the quote right here because it was so good when he said, He says, I don't know about you. This is what Barack said after Michelle finished speaking. He was coming up. He said, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling fired up. I am feeling ready to go. Even if I am the only person stupid enough to speak after Michelle Obama.
He knows.
He knows.
At least he knows.
So there's this, for those of you who don't know, there's a tradition on Good Friday called the 7 Last Words, and which means each preacher is supposed to only preach for about 10 to 12 minutes on one of the 7 last sayings of Jesus. And it's an honor to get to be the last speaker. And that's supposed to be the best preacher. And because it's the one that kind of closes like really the one who brings everything together and kind of, has that kind of within a Black church tradition, brings the house down, if you will, like really brings the spirit in a space where we can kind of, in the midst of our mourning of Jesus' death, hold on to the hope that we know is going to come with the resurrection. And I remember, like, I've been to services before where like the best preacher didn't go last because maybe it's at somebody's church and you're like, oh, you want this person, they want to go last. And like the best preacher went like 4th or 5th. And you just know, you're just like, man, you should let, you just be humble enough to be like, you know what? I know this is my church, but we know who the best preacher is. Let them go last. So like Barack, he was like, oh, they're going to want me to go last. I was the president. He just got to have some humility. Be like, you know what? They have heard enough of me. Right. they know. And she was
perfect.
Phenomenal. She was phenomenal. And I think so. A couple things that I want to point out with respect to how I see her leaning within the Black church tradition, and to an extent, Barack did this. Actually, he did this quite extensively as well. The way in which their entire speech is inclusive. Right? Like and this is what I think is what people don't understand about the history of the Black church, or many people don't, is that, historically, before integration, white people could go into these predominantly Black spaces. And so white people could go to a Black church if they so chose to. White people could walk into the space, sit down, and be fine. Black people couldn't do this prior to integration. And so Black churches have historically always been accommodating spaces, welcoming spaces, and recognizing that if this person is here, they must be longing for something, right? There's been this spirit of inclusion with respect to racial diversity in the history of the church. Much more growth is needed within gender, like power and hierarchy and sexual diversity, and those kinds of things. But it's always been a more diverse tradition, one might say, than historically speaking white Protestant churches. Yes. Yeah. And so what I see over and over in the Obama's speeches is this call to the inclusion and humanization of people who don't even agree with you, but you still see them as human beings and you still love them and you still care about them. As Warnock was saying, like, I want to care about my neighbor's children because they're going to impact my children. Right. And you see this over and over, when Obama is drawing a comparison between Michelle's mom and his grandmother, just like Wesley, you were saying, this notion of together. There is this history of solidarity that I think is what I'm getting at, that is present within the Black church tradition that wove through all of their speeches. And I thought it was particularly present in Michelle's speech. I loved the way she used call and response when she was, just the way she was talking about do something. I was like, man, because I'm watching this in like I'm in the bed like watching this because Isaiah might come in because he probably gonna, we got this whole sleeping issue with that's a whole nother podcast. So he might come in the room, and so I'm in the bed just in case he comes in, and I'm like sitting there, I'm like, do something, I'm at church, I know what I'm supposed to say, I'm like, do something, and it was just so powerful. And that call and response tradition. Again, this is Black preaching. This is Black rhetoric. And it was amazing to see it on stage, take such a center stage that night.
I also I say that for me, it was important to see her because she is a very grounded person. And I think she is the best messenger to express the seriousness, the dire seriousness of the situation, right? Like Kamala is about joy and Kamala is having a great time. And we need that. Like our souls need that. I will never not be surprised at how my soul has been lifted in the last 4 months. Like I didn't realize what a drag. Oh my God. Yeah. What an absolute drag the last 10 years have been. I had not realized it until Joe Biden said bye and Kamala said hey, and now I'm like, oh my God, what is this feeling?
Joy.
What?
Perhaps.
I didn't realize how affected I've been by the general state of things of our political climate.
Yeah.
And so it's important to find that joy again. But thank you, Michelle, for reminding us how serious this moment is. Like everything she says packs a punch, man.
Yeah, I think, one of my concerns may not be the right word. One of my worries about Kamala running prior to Joe stepping down, so when it was all theoretical, was how people respond to a Black woman running for president.
Ooh,
and
same.
what happened, and like, we saw what happened. I mean, it's obvious that Donald Trump is the result of electing Barack Obama.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, it was many white people's reaction, and white Christians, right? 85%. Sorry, 85% of evangelical Christians voting for this person who's clearly not Christian. Like, clearly not only not Christian, but has policies antithetical to the gospel. But when Michelle said, we cannot indulge our anxieties on whether or not this country will elect someone like Kamala, instead of doing everything we can to get someone like Kamala elected.
Exactly.
And this, she's like, do something. And I was just like, you right.
Look right to me.
Yep. It's like, and honestly, I was like, I'm going to ask my wife, because I was like, I just need to get him some money. I'm like, I ain't got time to be doing nothing. Like, I can't be out trying to call. I got him chasing my son. I'm about to be coaching soccer. I got like all this other
You're
stuff
the
going
soccer
on.
coach?
Yeah, I'm gonna be the soccer coach. So
Wow.
yeah. So
Good thing you don't have anything else going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, honestly.
Exactly. I know, but it's parenting. A future podcast episode, which we were just discussing, because it is hard work. But it spoke to me, and she was like, right, like, we can't let these people play on our fears, because that's how they win. They play on our fears rather than just like actually no. Most people can see someone, listen to someone that's intelligent, and they're not afraid of other people, right? And so we have to, what did Barack Obama, I think, quoted Abraham Lincoln talking about us being our better angels. And I think, I think the majority of people in this country actually aren't racist. I think the majority of these people in this country recognize someone who actually could do better for the country than someone who isn't. And it's about inspiring people and not getting caught up in the fear the fear mongering, if you will. Wesley, is there anything that stood out to you, I guess, in her speech?
I mean, y'all quoted the things that I was definitely looking forward to talking about. I mean, she's just such an inspirational figure. I can't imagine what it would have been like to be center stage for 8 years, knowing the vitriol that was coming at her the entire time. And yet she still chooses to like come into these spaces and speak powerfully and inspirationally to us. So, I mean, she's just, an icon, just incredible human being. I was seeing online just sort of like whenever the Obamas speak, but particularly when Michelle speaks, just how galvanizing she is to people. And even in sort of the conversation about who should replace Joe Biden if he steps down, I know that so many people echoed if Michelle ran, she would win. I think it just points to her power and her ability to really inspire people. And
and the fact that she never will is the reason that she should.
I mean,
she hates it, and she's like, absolutely not. And it's like, yes, that's why.
I think you can tell she's someone who actually doesn't want to be. She doesn't take joy that she has power. Right, that's the vibe I give from her. She's not
there
like,
for duty. She's there because she knows it's the right thing to do, not because she wants to be on the stage with those people screaming at her, giving the most amazing speech of the week. Like, she knows that she should. She's doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So, what were your favorite things that she said? One might call them zingers, or her burns on Trump, because she had a few lines that I thought were really good. And I don't know if there's anyone that stood out to y'all.
For me, it was the attacks on her and her husband that Donald Trump placed, where she was like, what did she say? Because he was mad that there are two intelligent, highly educated, successful people who happen to be Black.
She said, for years, Donald Trump did everything in his power to try to make people fear us. C, his limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of two hardworking, highly educated, successful people who happen to be Black.
Drag. That is what we call a read.
Yeah.
Wesley, what about you?
I mean, I think her lead up or her comment something to the effect of like Donald Trump might be learning that the job he's going for might just be one of those like Black jobs. I was like, it's taking like their words and the cultural moment that is happening right now and just like shoving it back in their face in the best way possible.
She said, "Who's gonna tell him?"
Yeah,
she said. I was like, man, and that's I mean that face as you know, like yeah, no, that was so good. I loved how she talked about the affirmative action of generational wealth. How most of us aren't born with the affirmative action. I was like, oh, dang. You know, because I mean, how they conservatives can be about affirmative action. And then she followed it up with, if we see a mountain in front of us, we also don't see an escalator waiting to take us to the top. We know we have to work and climb up there. And I was just like, she's naming the fact that this man's, you know, had the kind of affirmative action, had this economic privilege that's given him this platform where he didn't earn any of it. And he hasn't demonstrated competency since he's had it. And I mean, literally, she said he's not presidential in the way in which he responds to it because that's small. I was just, I mean, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. So
it's brilliant. I feel pretty encouraged from it. And I like continue to remind myself of Kamala's track record, that she hasn't lost an election since 2003. And her opponent has. And I think even seeing Hillary on Monday night, that there's this, you know, like it was 2016 was not a great night, those returns. And Hillary's speech on Monday night moved me because it reminded me, I think the way that the campaign that Kamala is running is so authentic. And I think the crack that Hillary left was the realization and understanding that you cannot perform your way into these roles. Like all of the rules that these people set about how you should appear and how you should perform and how you should be, they're bull because they don't adhere to those rules. And Donald Trump is the perfect example of that. And that the best thing that you can do is be honest and sincere and genuine. And I'm inspired by Hillary and Michelle and Barack and Kamala and Tim Walz because they are showing up just how they are. No, like Hillary was the last candidate, I hope, that we are going to see who's trying to perform to fit in to the weird boxes that they say exist, that they themselves don't even pretend to fit into.
I hope so. I want to end by honestly just spending a few minutes to commemorate, to lift up, to name what it was. Like so when the DNC roll call, because when it started, I had was cooking dinner and I was like, well, I'll just turn this down because it's not really important. And then I realized they're having a DJ.
Oh my God. And not just any DJ, a famous DJ.
I was like, what? And so then I like turned it up and I'm in the kitchen cooking and I'm like, why am I dancing to all these songs? I'm like, this is like, you know, and like learning new stuff. Like for instance, I didn't know the people that started Portugal the Man were from Alaska, like stuff like that. I was like, what? But the standout moment, and I've been singing this in my head before last night. I was singing Little John and I was saying From the Window to the Walls, and I was just saying because I thought it was just funny. I was just saying, I told Gab after, like we were in Michigan and I just kept saying From the Window to the Walls because I thought it was funny. And then to see Little John come out, and I'm like, how does he do it? He turned down for what? And like he is hype and he is getting everybody else hype, and he goes over to the Georgia area for them to do the roll call for the delegation, and then do from I think they were saying VP Harris and Tim Walz, or VP Harris and Walz, or something like, I don't know. They basically did the same thing, and so it was just the joy that was there. And the fact that you can have, you don't look at Little John and say, oh, this is someone I should be paid, that's going to be deeply political, right? But that I don't know. I just thought I was like, man, that's dope. That's
The
dope.
format was so dope. Like, just, you know, patriotism is extended this year from the Olympics.
We thought the Olympics would end it for us. But here we
Potentially
are.
through November. We'll see how it goes, right?
Absolutely.
But to have every state list the things that they were first in, it's just this reminder of like, sometimes I look at the myth of America and I'm like, where do you get these ideas about this great nation? How, why could you ever even imagine? And it's like this, it was for me, it was a reminder. I'm like, oh no.
There's something here.
There's something. I see where these myths come from. And the ability to like stand up and call out. I mean, you know, being a California girl, I can't claim Wisconsin after poor, sweet Tony last night. Bless him.
Oh, that was rough.
Whew, I was sitting on my couch. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up. I was so anxious. But California, like, and delivering the most, oh my God. What a flex. What an absolute flex. The most handsome governor.
I mean,
the most handsome.
He seems to be pretty handsome. I'm just like, I mean, how does it feel to be Kendrick Lamar right now?
Oh my God.
Right? To be Kendrick Lamar.
In our group text, someone was like, Alex was like, if they play not like us, and then they did.
Yeah. Right before announcing 482 votes for California. Just massive.
It was.
I mean, yeah. No, I mean, it is wild. I mean, that song has transcended, like it's everywhere. Like it is everywhere. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if you noticed.
Kendrick? How does it feel to be Drake?
Well, man, not good.
Ooh.
Not good.
I feel good.
Can't feel good. So, Julie, I don't even know if you noticed at the softball game, that was the song I had them play when I was up at bat. When I went up to bat, I just had to play it like not super loud. I was like, because Josh, you know, they were like, "Oh, what song to play?" Anyway, it was in our church softball league. That song is just we win obviously, but
obviously.
I was just trying to make a point. You know, they not like us. The other team, they not like us.
Wartime championships.
Yep. So
champions.
Anyway, no, it was a party. I think it was what conventions at their best are supposed to be. It's what I would say church at its best is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. But also, I guess in closing, the thing I think it represented to that I kept hearing over and over, and this actually I think kind of points to the mistake of 2016 with Hillary, is they recognize there's work to be done. That's why they kept saying do the work. Like they're not saying this is over. They don't think it's an easy win. They're like, no, we have, like, you can't take it for granted. We have to do the work to earn this win.
Fight.
Yeah. And I think that is key. That is critical. I think with respect to, I see this again overlapping with progressive Christianity. Like we can't pretend that our excellent theological reasoning will persuade people to follow, to believe this way. We have to continue to not only make an argument, we have to do the work to persuade people and show them what it means to actually, follow the religion of Jesus. So yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm hopeful. I'm excited. And as Julia said, I guess I'll see how patriotic I am in November.
I know. The most inspiring thing I saw Kamala say was, there's this video of her and she's, she can be condescending. I love it. She was just like, I don't know what someone said to her, but she looks at the camera and she goes, yes, we can do hard things. And like, it was so, I keep thinking about it because, okay, maybe not to you guys, but this is revelatory to me. Okay. We can do hard things. It is going to be hard.
I think, and so Wesley, I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I think we've underplayed the impact of growing up with immigrant parents had on her, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think we've drastically underplayed it because like when you are the child of immigrant, like all you see is what your parents gave up to give you the opportunity to do something, right? Just to give you the chance. And like, so every successful child of immigrants I know is, I won't say a workaholic, but they understand that their parents did the hardest thing so that they can do something that's kind of hard, right? Does that resonate with you, Wesley?
Yeah. In the last couple of weeks, I saw some things on the internet about sort of like, the experience of being the child of an immigrant. And one thing that really sort of like connected with me was this, like, being a child of an immigrant, especially immigrants who don't speak English, it means that you at your first grade English reading level are translating documents that have like world changing potential for your parents. But because you're the only one that knows how to speak and read English, you're doing something that a first grader shouldn't be doing. So it just points to that, like, we have been doing hard things all our lives. And so we can continue and should continue to do hard things. So yeah, absolutely.
Preach. Look at Wesley coming in with the word to wrap everything up.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Progressive Christians podcast. If you would like to connect with us and be a part of the conversation, you can visit the website of our church. Again, our podcast website will be up here the next few weeks. And the church website is www.theloftla.org. You can follow us on Instagram. Follow The Loft on Instagram at @TheLoftLA. I also want to invite you, if you like the show, please rate, review, share, subscribe, do all those kinds of things to us on whatever podcast platform you're using. We got about maybe 2 more weeks where we're sharing the same podcast feed as The Loft, and then we will be having our own podcast feed. So if you're still listening to this from the Loft podcast feed, please subscribe to the new feed. Just search the Progressive Christians podcast and you'll find us to subscribe there. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we will see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.